Yeah, we're starting in 3, 2, 1.
Not supposed to
Hey, what up? What's up,
Not
Casey?
supposed to say one?
You're not supposed to.
Yo.
Wow,
How's it going? No, you're not supposed to say one.
Failed.
It's the one and then the.
Did we start?
Haven't you watched Wayne's
We're
World?
starting right now.
We're in the middle of our start.
Oh,
You're not supposed to ask, "Are we starting?" when we've already started.
Good night.
this is my first
Goodness
time.
Okay, let's start this over. 3, 2. Here we go. Hey, SDP Nation.
Did we just restart?
No, we never stopped starting. We've been starting the whole
We've
time.
been done started.
It's already done started.
We done did started.
We done did start this
We
thing
better
already.
go hard into community.
Well, actually, let's go ahead and officially start. Welcome to the Salty Dogs Podcast.
Seriously,
Jason here.
welcome. Yes.
And Casey's at the table.
Yeah,
Chris Cerna.
Yo.
Roll call. And Jeff Jewett. What's up, man?
a staple.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Jeff Jewett is a
It's-
staple.
Dude, it stays morning
He
because
should be a
he's a
co-host
pastor.
himself.
Yeah.
Stays morning.
It stays morning. It stays morning for pastors.
You mean he
Christopher-
stays in morning?
No. Well, yeah, that
Yeah.
too. Like Jeremiah, the prophet. Christopher likes to do different things in the beginning of our podcast. Always throws me off last
Which
second.
really
I know.
just-
I'm like, Dad, can we do this? And you're
Yeah.
like, no,
really,
we're not doing
really grinds
We're doing my
Jason's
thing.
gears.
It really grinds my gears.
that. Well, we were talking about
Dad, can I read this article on the podcast? Go ahead, son.
Well, it didn't even work out the way that I wanted it to. But we were talking about Christianese. Me and Casey were making some really funny Christianese things. I wish
I
you
didn't
guys
even
could
know
have
I
heard
was
them.
speaking Christianese.
You were. You know what Christianese is,
I was
don't
fluent in that language.
You were. I mean, from womb to knees.
Do you want to start over again so we can do what you wanted to do?
No, that's fine. We're going. But
We could totally just scratch the whole thing.
do you want to
Which is what Jason wants to do.
I don't want to scratch the whole thing.
No, keep it going.
Okay.
Anyway, back to
Well, we'll
Chris.
see what happens.
I don't know. I don't feel led. That's Christianese. That's Christianese. But I want to read. I want to read
You
a
know
list.
what else is Christianese though? Like, have you ever heard somebody say they have an unction? That's like super deep Christianese.
Yeah.
I really feel like when people
Get on your mic.
I feel like the ultimate Christianese is let me pray about that, which just means I don't want to do that.
Where's your
Because
heart?
most people don't do that.
Where's your heart, bro?
Where's your heart at?
Check your heart, bro.
We're gonna get together and have some sweet fellowship.
Really just want to echo the echo of your echo of my echo.
How's your quiet time going, brother? All of those. If it's the Lord's will. Yeah, all of those. Praying hedges of protection.
Oh my gosh, the hedge of protection though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Which
I always wonder. It's like the demons are like prowling around. They're like, "Oh no, a hedge! We must about face army of demons."
you know what I think
Ominous
is
bush.
It's not a
Whoa.
bush, man. It's a tree. You know?
Whoa!
A hedge.
Oh my!
you know what I
gosh.
think is really funny
Tell me.
when Christians talk about non-believers in these weird phrases like they're backsliders or
non-believers?
non-believers or
Shine the non-believers, shine.
well no it's just like if you
They're
really,
seekers.
if you really think it
Seeker. They're seekers.
it's just super funny to
We're
talk
seeker.
about
We're
to talk to
seeker
people
friendly.
about that.
Oh my goodness gracious! What
Anyways,
has this turned into?
It's not that great.
So I have to give you guys 2 critiques about the last episode.
Oh no.
It's okay. It's good criticism. It's not. It's
I
not.
wasn't on it.
Yeah, you weren't on it. So it's
So
not about
Jeff
our
just-
theology. So
Can
we
I help?
apparently we're still not
Oh, so our
heretics.
I
theology
actually
is
wish it
unlocked.
was about
No,
theology.
we're not heretics apparently. So that's great. But we have
didn't know that.
we have been known to all talk at once into the mic, and so everything is unintelligible. It's like a Pentecostal church service.
My wife was like, I just listened to the last podcast, and man, you interrupt a lot. I was like,
She said that to you.
she said that. To
So that's 2 times. That okay? So then the other one
I actually
was
don't think it's that big of a deal.
no. But listen, hold on
Okay.
a second.
And I'm not
Okay.
sure it counts coming from a spouse.
Oh gosh.
Oh, there we
Well,
go. Lara did not say that.
dang
actually,
it.
but Lara's never listened
and then
to
the
the
other,
podcast.
and then the other critique was wanting to hear from the guest more. So, Jeff, you're going to be on tonight, all right?
I'm
I
fried.
hope you brought the heat.
Oh, he
I
brought
hope
it.
you brought the heat.
He brought it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Okay.
eat the heat.
So, anyways, Christopher, were you done with your article?
Yeah, the tanked. It's so bad.
Do you want to start over?
No, I don't care. We can just keep
Mulligan.
Going. Yeah,
We can
Mulligan.
pray about it.
we can. Let me pray about it. It was just really. I thought me and Casey were going to go into some serious Christianese and it would be funny, and it wasn't. So I will never bring anything new to the table again.
For the listeners that are still with us after
Right.
after all this.
Oh, they're there. There's 4 of them
Oh, wow.
right now, live. So I don't know. Yeah. Anyways,
Anyways,
so we're here. We're doing this thing.
we are here.
Yep. It's the podcast.
It is.
Salty Dogs.
Here we are.
SDP.
Season 3.
And the
place to
ICT.
be.
Episode 6 with our guest, Jeff Jewett.
Mm.
Right? But
JJ
first,
JJ the jet plane.
but wait, there's more. Oh my gosh, I need my computer to load. Come on.
It's this basement Wi-Fi.
It's the basement Wi-Fi. So it's time for one of my favorite segments of the show.
We only have one segment.
No, we have going hard in the banter paint intro, and then we have the segment where we talk about starting the intro over again. So we just left that segment,
I hate that segment.
That's a brand new segment.
and then we have the
Worse.
segment where you try and bring new things to the podcast, and we all know how that works.
and now we're moving on to this new segment.
And I actually had something that I wanted to talk about, but
You do?
Well, we could talk about
Do
that
you really?
after this next.
Yeah.
This
I wanted
hold
to
on.
talk about. I bought a smoker last weekend to smoke delicious meats, and it was really good. It was really fun. I've been wanting to do it for a while. My dad is an avid barbecuer, and he bought a smoker, and so I've been watching all the stuff that he's been smoking, and so I was like, you know what? I need a really expensive machine in my life that smokes delicious meats for me. So I made a chicken the first time, and it was undercooked, so we didn't eat it. Except the wings and the legs were done, so we ate those. We did not eat the breast. The other thing I made this last weekend was ribs, and I sent Jason a picture of them, and they were really good, and they looked really good. And Jason had smoker envy.
I had smoker envy totally.
This is totally leading into our topic, by the way.
Is it
Right.
Oh, yeah,
food.
actually,
Absolutely.
that's what I meant,
we
guys.
forgot about the
Ugh.
topic.
Oh my gosh,
Oh, wow.
we did. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. So you bought a smoker. You
I
feel
bought
like a
a
man
smoker.
now.
Well, no, because that's toxic masculinity. So no, I do not
Oh,
feel
well,
like
doesn't-
a man. I just feel like a person
Well,
who
I
likes
feel
to
like-
I
smoke
think you-
delicious
Man,
meats.
I feel like a woman. You know?
I think
Somewhere in between is what I feel like.
I was
I
thinking
think
Cheech and
you-
Chong.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think you look more like a man today than you ever have because you're decked out in Houston Astros gear. I'm just saying.
They're spanking bottoms right now. They're on a 9-game winning streak. So I got to represent my Houston Astros.
Yep, there you go. All right.
Boom.
Well, back to the podcast.
Wow.
We're still podcasting.
I think we should
have we
start over.
Have we started yet?
We can totally start
Oh
over.
my gosh! I swear, if you guys
Pass the salt.
we actually do talk. So here's another interesting thing about Past the Salt, which is the segment that I love. If I say it too fast, it sounds like past assault. So it's like our past assault segment of the show where we talk about we got beat or we beat somebody. But that's not what this is. Past Assault is actually where we read reviews and comments and messages that people say in the show. And
Don't do this segment next time.
Yeah.
which one? This segment?
This segment next
Oh,
podcast
man.
when they're reviewing this podcast.
Boy. Yeah, I know, right?
Hi, caramba.
Oh, you know what? I just think it's like it's later. I mean, we're more closer.
More closer.
We're closer to our bedtime. Yeah, I don't know.
It's all scattered.
It is.
whole
I'm all
thing.
scattered brain. So check this out. We've got John from Facebook to the Salty Dogs Podcast Facebook page. He says, "So I have nearly an hour drive to work each day, and I've been looking for something to listen to when I'm burned out on music. I used to love talk radio, but the bickering, the politicking, it all distracts me from my spiritual walk. So far, I like what these fellas are putting down." That's a pretty strong.
Until he listens to this episode.
I mean, I don't know.
The
This might be the one that either, you know what, we might gain an audience from just being like this, or we might lose an audience. But
At least it's real. You know what I mean? And, you know, John, we're putting it down, but I hope the Lord puts down some rosy cheeks on your face. You know?
dude, that is by far the best doffing of rosy cheeks to anyone's face you've ever given.
Good.
Yeah.
I hope he wears them proud. Who gave those to you? The Lord?
Are those rosy cheeks you're wearing? Why, yes, they are.
Man, you guys are going to have to forgive us. We had another level of stupidity. So
These
check it
headphones
out.
are sweaty.
We cannot start podcasting after 7:30. We can't. We have to do it
No,
at 7.
so
It's
leading,
like not feeding gremlins after midnight.
It does not go well.
It doesn't go well. Listen to the old Asian man's wisdom.
segueing into our topic. JJ over here had an awesome. I was just sitting in the pews one of these days, you know, and he's his church is the church that I attend. Well, it's not his church technically; it's the Lord's church, but that's where I go to. And he had this sermon that was called "Food and Faith," and to be honest, the amount I don't know. I don't know if it was the state that I was in, or or if it was just the word. I don't know. But like it hit me so hard because there were just so many things that it sparked off. When you get to when you're listening to somebody or using their gifting, and Jeff operates in the gift of teaching as well as Jason and Chris. Does what he does. But like,
You got the giggles there, guy?
yeah. But when you're listening to somebody and you just you're there in that moment, and you're there in that moment, and it really just you're there for that reason. And this food and faith sermon that he preached, and I mean, we're not going to go through. I mean, we got a sermon notes, but that was just kind of a preface. But
It's pronounced preface.
I prefer preface.
He prefaces people.
So, but it was so profound to me, and the amount of knowledge that we can glean. So everything physical is a shadow of the spiritual, and everything. And so when we talk about like even the aspect of food, like we can talk about all these different like trees or anything else like in the physical realm, but it's always like a shadow of the absolute truth. So there's truth, right? And there's a deeper truth. And so the deeper truths that I was gleaning out of his message that the Lord put on his heart was seriously profound, and it sparked some things in me that we're going to get into later. But I just kind of wanted to open it up to Jeff and just kind of let him lead us into this, because I really felt that the Lord, that this is, I mean, I told him instantly after that. I came right up to him after the sermon. I was like, man, you have got to come on the podcast and talk about this because it's important. And I felt that it was very important. So I'm just going to let Jeff kind of lead us into and introduce us to this topic. And then hopefully it'll spark out, some conversation here.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Have you survived?
I don't know. Ask me in an hour.
Well, yeah, right. So tell us the name of the paper you were just writing before you walked through the doors to get on this podcast.
Yeah, I had to present a paper on the Cartesian revolution, René Descartes, Cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, and the difference between individuality and personhood. The idea being that the individual is profoundly separated from God, and the person is someone who is in community. So I am who I am because of you.
Interesting.
That's
kind of like the same concept of namaste, right? Like, I mean, not the same concept, but like,
Yeah. It, to an extent, the concept of individuality contra the Cartesian revolution, this idea that we think and that gives us being is completely false. Individuality is the mantra of our culture, and it's absolutely false. And that really is an unintentional but good segue into some of what we're talking about.
Well, good. I hope so.
Because
I know, geez.
Well, it's this idea that we are connected in every aspect to each other and to creation itself. And honestly, I used to dismiss a lot of this as whether it's mysticism or political, all of these different things, and really it's a form of Gnosticism, which separates, or dualism, which separates the material from the spiritual, where we think this idea that the spiritual is good and the physical is bad.
Right.
And so the goal of the Christian faith is to separate ourselves from the physical, which is not right. We were created in the body. We were created in creation. We were created as part of creation. And so
we were, in a sense, created from creation.
From creation. We'll talk about that. And so this idea of food, and just a bit of an anecdote to introduce it. I've heard of course, I'm sitting here as a 90-pound weakling, but I
is that all you weigh?
Give or take. But I had heard, the global perspective of Americans, and especially when you start looking at statistics in terms of health and weight and those things, and it's startling. Okay, I really didn't think it was that big of a deal until a couple of years ago, my wife and I took a trip to Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent the week there, and it was amazing. Everyone's out walking and riding bicycles and all of this, and we come back, and I remember landing in Houston and getting on, yeah,
Whoop, whoop.
yeah, and getting on the transit that took us from one terminal to another, and it was like we had just been crammed on trains in Europe for a week where we could fit. And then we sit down on this tram and it was like, ba-boom.
Oh, wow.
You know, everybody's taking up 2 or 3 chairs. And it's like, it was so startling to me. And it really kind of opened my eyes to something that I hadn't seen before. And typically when we speak of food in the church, we speak about it in terms of one aspect, which is gluttony.
Gluttony, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a part of Dante's Inferno.
Absolutely.
Our
Yeah.
entire theology based off of Dante's Inferno, which you've also went into depth about when we've had conversations about concerning like our views of hell and other things have been severely shaped by just that alone.
Just that one work more so than
others
than the Bible.
Than
even.
the Bible, yeah.
But in the church, it seemed like the only response to food was the talk about how bad it is, and then New Year's would roll around and we would all get on our diets.
Yeah.
You know, and it was just this ongoing cycle. And truth be told, I was kind of weary of it until I ran across a book that really reshaped how I thought everything concerning food. It was a guy by the name of Warren Wiersbe. And he wrote a theology, essentially a systematic theology, riveting read. But he wrote a systematic theology on the importance of food and faith, the title of his book. And so it's robbed.
It's called Food and Faith.
It's called Food and Faith.
Okay.
And the intro to the book had a 3-sentence paragraph or a 3-sentence intro that I think is the best intro to a book that I've ever read anywhere at all. And if it's okay, I brought it and I'm going to read it, and that'll get us going.
Yeah, sure.
The whole thing. Go for it.
The whole thing.
Just these sentences.
Okay, awesome.
And now he's quoting someone else. He's quoting Wendell Berry, and he says, "To live, we must daily break the body and shed the blood of creation. When we do this knowingly, lovingly, skillfully, reverently, it is a sacrament. When we do it ignorantly, greedily, clumsily, destructively, it is a desecration."
Dang.
It's powerful.
That is.
I remember reading that in your notes.
Yeah, and it rattled me, like how we eat, how we engage in this base activity that is common to everything that is alive.
Yeah. Right.
Is sacramental.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, even what you just said, like how we relate in commonality to one thing is, and this is where I was going with it when I was pondering these things, because I liken our diet and even like what I see around me. And there's a verse in Proverbs where he's talking about the king's table and the king's delicacies, right? He's talking about put a knife to your throat if you think that you're going to overindulge. And so I liken it unto sin, which sin is the commonality that we all share, you know. And so it was profound to me, and I think the way, you know, when I think about those things, like I think about diet in a sense of, you know, what we hunger for, right? So we hunger for something, we thirst for something, right? That's an essential human need. And so where we go to fill that says a lot about our self-discipline and our self-control. Well, because I know that when I'm driving down the road and I go by Burger King, man, those charbroiled burgers, they smell dope, man. Like I want to get me one of those burgers, but I know in the sense that that's not good for me. And I can see that now. And so ever since I had surgery, I haven't been as active, and I can tell that like when I was active and I was actively doing things, my diet, even though it was good, it wasn't as good as it should be. I was in shape, you know what I mean? Because I was always climbing, I was always pushing myself, you know what I mean? All day long, that's all I was doing was climbing. And so I realized that when I got stagnant, or when I got, when I was at a place where I couldn't do what like a place of, he brought me to a place of silence and rest. But even in my resting, my diet was so poor that I started gaining weight. You know what I mean? Even though in a sense, in my mind, I'm doing what's healthy because I can't be active on my shoulder, my inactivity led me, in my inactivity, my diet was so poor that I was starting to gain weight. And it's not a good thing. You know what I mean? And so I liken that.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say, and you brought it up, you said we all have the commonality of sin, but I mean, obviously, physically, we all have the commonality that we have to eat. But
Yes.
in the same regard, spiritually, we have
hunger
to eat. So it made me think of just a couple things, if I can maybe get these thoughts out. So I wrote down the word appetite. So we all have an appetite. It reminds me of a song called "Appetite for Destruction." Do you remember this song? I think it was
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah,
it's an album. Actually,
it's an album. Yeah, "Appetite for Destruction." But we all have an appetite, and it's just interesting how you have this in your notes, but in the garden you have two trees, right? You have the tree of life, and you have the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Obviously, we know what happens when we ate of the bad tree. There's death. We eat of the tree of life, there's eternal life, right? And so they were not able to partake of that after they ate of the one tree. But within us, we all have this flesh and this innate desire to do what is contrary to what the Spirit wants. And so until we're essentially saved and regenerated by the Spirit of God, our appetite is always for self and for sin. And then when the Lord comes and He changes us, well, then He changes our appetites, essentially.
I agree with that, but I think that I would digress back to, I think that we have a hunger, and essentially what we have traded the fruit of the tree of life for is death. And so our hunger is there.
Right.
And we are sinful by nature, but I think that our hunger has propelled us towards, because we've partaken of the tree of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and so the hunger is there. But I don't think we necessarily. I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to formulate that in my mind right now.
And I think you're onto something. It is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil,
right?
But stop on that word knowledge, because God has promised knowledge. God has promised. Truth. God has promised Himself. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil is knowledge apart from God.
Right.
Essentially, this is self-exaltation. And think for a moment, even the way you were articulating your drive past Burger King, about how this would satisfy you, or even your diet and everything, about how this was good for you. See, it never came into consideration about what was good for the cow that died for that burger, because that cow did die for that burger, or how that cow was raised, or what effects that had on land. And I know that starts to sound very foo-foo and out there.
But it's not, though.
It's not. It's not, because our consideration, this is what the tree of knowledge of good and evil does, is it makes the consideration first and foremost us. And last other, because the other is the tree of life, because that's partnership, that's participation with God. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil is self-revelation, not divine revelation. Dang. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes.
That's good. And so it just is such a huge thing to recognize that the first sin was a sin of food.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's huge.
And you have a list here, and if you don't mind me reading, I mean, I just want to read it right now, because you had wrote off a list that of everything that contained food, or how important, some of them, how important it was, how important the aspect of food is into not only the Old Testament but into the gospel. And I just want to read this off. It'll take just a second, but just read. It was a sacrifice of food that caused ill will between Cain and Abel. It was a meal that greeted the Theophany.
Where am I?
Why do you use such big words?
Theophany.
Theophany of God when he came in the guise of 3 guests at the home of Abraham. It was a scarcity of food that drove Israel and his family to the abundance of Egypt. It was through the meal of Passover that God caused the nation of Israel to remember her release from slavery. It was for food's sake that the nation complained against God in the wilderness. Even the land of promise was described as a land flowing with milk and honey. It was harvesting grain and threshing wheat that Ruth was made known to Boaz. It was for food's sake that David and his men ate the sacramental bread in the temple. It was around the table that David honored his fallen friend Jonathan by caring for his crippled child. It was food that separated Israel from all the nations, as they ate only those things that God had deemed clean for them to eat. It was food that separated Daniel and his 3 friends when made captive in Babylon. And then we go to the New Testament. John came eating wild honey and locusts. Jesus appeared fasting in the wilderness. It was at the wedding feast that Jesus performed his first miracle in the turning of water into wine. It was the blessed loaves and fishes of a peasant boy that fed the multitudes of 5,000 and 4,000 people. It was around a table that Zacchaeus repented and sought restitution. It was around the table when Jesus was anointed by Mary. It was around a table that Jesus celebrated Matthew's conversion and invited all of his friends. It was a fine food that was a celebration of the prodigal son's return. It was to those who hunger and thirst after righteousness that God promised he would fill. Indeed, it was Jesus himself that said, I am the bread of life. It was around a Passover table celebrating the deliverance that Jesus said, this is my body, and this is the blood. And after his resurrection, Jesus proved himself by eating fish with his disciples. And it was around a breakfast campfire that Jesus restores Peter.
I love that.
Dude, that one gets me every single time.
I love it.
And it comes as no surprise that the ultimate celebration of Christ's return is called the wedding feast of the Lamb, around which all those who belong to the body of Christ will gather and be made one around one table, celebrating one savor and so sharing one meal.
Revelation 19:9. Then the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And he added, these are the true words of God. Yeah, that's...
Jeez. I mean, that list, but it shows you, man. So even though, we can kind of flippantly look at this and say, well, what can we possibly glean from food? But man, if it was that important, and it obviously is that important, what can we discuss around this table right here in fellowship, right? So the key one of the key things there is fellowship around one table, unified around one table. What can we talk about there? That's,
Yeah, dude, the meal is so important. I preached a message before about the meal, and I touched on the prodigal son, Peter being restored over fish, on the beach, and then ultimately being, then also Jesus says, was it Revelation 3, where he's saying, behold, I stand at the door and I knock, and if anyone lets me in, I'll come in and I'll
sup with him.
I'll dine. I'll sup with him. He says, I want to come eat a meal. Right. And there's so much. So like, I think we can go many different ways at this point in time. Chris, are you feeling a certain way?
Yeah. Well, I just the one that stood out to me when I read that list was, when you talk about the children of Israel, when they leave, and I remember, reading, I think it's in, reading just about them complaining. And when you read about them complaining, you just get this like, oh man, they're being a bunch of babies. but that's exactly how I and others respond when I, withhold something that I want from myself, whether that be for whatever reason. I whine and complain and get hangry and say things that I would say I don't mean, but obviously I do mean them because I'm saying them. And so what's really interesting is I think this whole topic that when we talk about it, you talked about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, how when we look at this, it shifted the focus to us. And I think even like when we talk about eating well, my viewpoint for a long time, again, was all about me. I want to change the way that I'm eating so that I will lose weight, so that I will feel good about myself. It's me, so me-centered. And there's something in my life that God's been dealing with me on. And I've addressed the fruit issue of this thing. And this morning I was sitting outside drinking some coffee, and I was just kind of praying about it. And I felt like I was like, God, I've done well, and I felt like I had been doing well with this thing, and then I felt like God was like, hey man, you really need to get to the root of this. Like you're addressing the fruit, and Sam McVeigh, he's pretty well known for dropping the fruit and the root thing, but it's moving from that fruit to the root, and even us withholding, like, okay, I'm going to change the way I eat, I'm going to change this about what I'm doing, and some of it we may think it's like, oh, okay, I want to feel better about myself. But there's this deeper issue there.
Right.
There's this dependency, this idolization, this seeking comfort from food. There's all of these different aspects that are there. And so, anyways, I've been quiet for a little
It's
bit, but
worship.
exactly,
It's worship.
exactly. And so
Yeah.
we've taken the focus off of even honoring God in that.
Mm-hmm.
The other big one that stood out to me was that, Jews being set apart by what they ate. That Casey read off from that list too. So I don't know. That's all the stuff that I'm coming to think about.
Isn't it interesting that the Israelites in their wandering in the wilderness, they wanted to go back to Egypt for the leeks and onions.
Mm-hmm.
That was why they wanted to go back to Egypt. It was for food. They were willing to give up their freedom that Christ had purchased or God had purchased for them for the sake of food.
But what about Esau?
There you go, giving up his birthright.
So let's dive into that a little bit deeper then. So one of the, how do I want to put this? World hunger, right? Like world hunger is a thing, and
It
people,
shouldn't be.
right? Well, exactly. But people go without food because food it's sustenance for life.
Right.
Everybody deserves food and water and shelter.
Everyone requires
For life.
Yes.
Food.
Yes.
So when we're talking about physical and spiritual and not being able to separate those things, it's interesting to consider then, like, why is food such a big deal? So here's what it makes me think about this. So we're getting into we could go into some different territory with this, but in Scripture, and specifically in Romans, I think it's Romans 9 or 10, where it starts to talk about the whole predestination thing, right? But God essentially raises Pharaoh up as an instrument of wrath, right? So he had a purpose for Pharaoh to like lift him up, and anyways, you just see the purpose behind what God does. I mean, you think about all of creation declaring God's glory. You think about how you can study trees and then figure out the attributes and the features of God in the way that he's knit that into the DNA of every organic living being on the face of the planet, right? It reminds me of in Hebrews where the writer is reminding us that it was told to Moses to be sure to follow everything the way the Lord commanded him to do it when building the temple, the tent, because it was a shadow of what was in heaven. So everything had these spiritual undertones. And so it's interesting that on a daily basis I hunger and on a daily basis I feed. How is that? How can that God, like, what is he doing?
I think
to show us something about our spiritual nature through what happens to us physically.
Where I would begin with that is the recognition that in eating there is gospel, because every time you chew on something, something has died that you can live. Every time.
Holy crap.
Every time. There's no exception to the rule. To some extent, something has died for your life.
Plants and animals.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even prior to that point, the miracle of soil, right? I'm from northern Illinois.
Uh-oh. Casey's about to get on one.
Yeah, I'm from northern Illinois, where you just it's black dirt. It's amazing stuff.
It's rich.
It is rich. And when we moved to Kansas, and I had this little plot in my backyard that I was going to turn into garden, I remember turning over the dirt the first time and looking at it going, I don't know what to do with this.
Oh, wow.
And I told my wife, I said, give me 5 years and I'll grow good dirt. And we're about 4 years in.
4 years in.
I've got some pretty good soil going.
So let's talk about that, though. What are you doing to enrich the soil?
That's the key. Soil itself absorbs death. That's what it does.
Yep. It decomposes it. Well, I mean, the things
You're so
within the soil.
poetic.
But
the
it
truth.
it is.
Talk to me more about
Yeah.
death. It's intriguing.
Good soil. Good soil is a history of death in all regards. That's where the nutrients come from. That's where life emerges from. See, just as eating is gospel, part of that story begins in the soil, which is the story of resurrection. That death
Yeah.
goes in and life comes out.
Absolutely, and this is
Wow.
exactly what God had been talking to me, and I didn't even know how, because God was formulating these thoughts in my mind. I was like, this isn't even going to play in, but I'm glad that you brought up the soil, because the soil is fundamentally the most. So you look at a tree, right, and if I'm going there and I'm going to diagnose a tree, the exterior always is a telltale sign of what's going on at the deeper issue, right? So those exterior problems are like usually it starts in the soil.
soil.
If there's poor soil, if there's poor drainage, if it's compacted, if there's anything, that's why the parable of the soils is so important, because it's talking about our heart, right? And so what I want to get into here. So when I'm diagnosing a tree, I always know if the exterior is suffering, that always means that the first thing that I ever investigate before I talk about pests or diseases or anything, if the tree is stressed, it is originally stressed almost always from the soil that it's planted in, okay? And so I wanted to move into this thing where we're talking about the cultivation of the heart, right? Because Jesus was talking about, unless a seed dies and it falls to the ground and dies, it can't do. So within the soil of our heart, is it any wonder? So to me, in my mind, when Jesus said, "Take up my yoke," right, which is to partner with him, right? So when I think back to what the oxen were doing back then, what did they use oxen for? Plowing the field, man. And we're talking about the interior here, and Jesus is calling us to partner with him in the cultivation of our heart, okay? And that's the ingestion, okay, of Christ. Christ said, this is my flesh, this is my blood. But I think about this, man. Okay, God the Father is the source of all life. So God the Father is the tree in the garden. He is the tree. Jesus, because we cannot ingest God as a whole. We cannot receive him in whole. Jesus is the fruit of the tree of life. A fruit has what? Flesh, and it has juice, blood. Jesus is the tangible, tasteable part of the Father. He is the receivable part of God the Father. Right. And in that is seed. So when you ingest, and we were talking about this in marriage group just literally before this, we're always doing exterior things, right? We're always doing, okay, well, if I do this, this will lead me to a better life. But the work is always interior. Right. You know what I mean? And so the God the Father, the Word, right, is like a seed, right? But when that seed is thrown, or when it's ingested, or however you want to go about ingesting the Son, right? That death, which is what he was talking about, that death gives life. So he's calling us not only to partner with him, yoked with him, to cultivate the interior of our spirit. Dude, he's calling us. It says, I think it was in James, where he's talking about, man, God brings the rains. Or what was the proverb? It was saying, like, you sow here or you sow there, but you don't. God the Father, God's the only one that makes it grow, right? And so we're called to cultivate the soil of our hearts, man, so that as we ingest the sacrament, right, the flesh and the blood. So when you inside of the fruit is seed, man, and that's how that's how the tree propagates. You know, and the interior is what I really wanted to talk about, man. And that was a profound thing to me, because it's the most important part, man.
But notice the pathway to the interior is the tangible. Christ did not give us a spiritual meal that is intangible. It is a spiritual meal that is made from the base grains of the earth, from the crushed grapes that produce the wine. It is not, the meal itself is not an intangible meal. Jesus said before he had instituted the Last Supper as a Eucharistic, a Thanksgiving celebration, before he had said that in John, he made the comment, to people that did not understand this, he says, you must eat of my flesh and drink my blood.
Yep.
That is, and people started leaving.
Yeah. They're like, okay, this is weird. Yeah.
This is weird.
Yeah, okay, guy.
But
Yeah.
it's tangible participation. And and in talking about the interiority of our lives, we also need to understand that the interior and the exterior need to match. That our exterior practice is an echo of the interior reality.
Right.
But sometimes the reverse is true. I just read a quote by C.S. Lewis, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but he said, we need not get so fixated on what it means to love another if we don't like them or we really don't love them. He says, the reality is we just need to practice love, and eventually the love will follow.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a sense where an exterior life of faithfulness gives way to an interior life of holiness.
Right, paves the way.
It paves the way.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, but I also think that this is the difference between food that nourishes and food that does not nourish. So anything that we ingest that comes into our body that is not needed is what? Expelled.
Right.
Okay, but Jesus said, though, if you drink the water that I give you, if you partake of what I give you, it will give you life, right? It's nourishing. So he doesn't give us anything that is going to be expelled from us, not from him, right? If we ingest anything, it's going to come out of us, right? But the nourishment that he gives us, like exactly what we're talking about, so, it will become a well in him, like coming out from within him, leading up to eternal life. That's the difference between something ingested that is nutritious and something that ingested that is expelled, because that's the waste. And there is no waste with God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In Christ, it's all nutrition. So that, I know that when I eat things that are healthy for me, I feel, you feel it. You can just feel. But when you eat that crap, man, like you feel like what you eat. You feel literally like I feel horrible. I'm like, oh my God.
No, it's more literal than that. I even think the old saying, "You are what you eat." When we think about communion, this is literally the case. You are what you eat. You become what you're ingesting. And in that passage, I was just trying to look it up, but in that passage that Jesus was talking about, where what we put into our bodies is expelled, he was talking also about our mouths. Again, here is here's fruit, the fruit of our lives, and he is essentially, and you can look up the passage yourself. I don't have it off the top.
How does it quote?
It's the passage
It's
out of
not-
the overflow of your heart.
The mouth speaks.
Yes. But in there, he is essentially saying, stick with me on this, he is saying the mouth is to the heart what the butt is to the body.
Exactly. I knew that.
Luke 6:45.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
Well, I
that's-
mean, if you look at our world and you just look at the culture and what everything that's advertised to us, I mean, and everything that's taught, it's all about the outward stuff and taking care of outward,
Yeah.
and a lot of the times it's outward, taking care of outward to have an effect on the inward, when we can, and there's some truth to that, but we can also just go straight to the inward, and we can also just go straight
Absolutely.
to the heart and what's going on there. And I think for me, like I'm hearing this and I'm going, I mean, obviously I'm the light bulbs, when I was reading your notes, Jeff, they were going off. There's so much wisdom in everything that you're saying. So for me, I'm looking at this and going, okay, what does this look like? How do I begin to implement this in my life? And I just thought of a friend of mine that I have. She actually started to pray and ask God, how do you want me to eat?
Yep.
And she, because she heard directly from God, eat this way, she began to eat that way. And there was, and it's not that the driving factor behind it was, I want to lose weight, or I want to do this, or whatever, but I want to honor God. And anything that we do, even if it's a pornography addiction, I don't want to feel bad about this anymore. That's not a not a good thing either. But when any type of sin in our life, when it switches and moves from I don't want to feel X, Y, and Z, or I want this, to I want to honor God and I want to do whatever He's calling me to do, you can begin to source from the Holy Spirit. I believe in those instances when it's not self-centered and self-focused.
It's the choice of the tree you're eating from.
Exactly.
Either the tree of knowledge of good and evil or the tree of life.
Right.
And in this instance, the choice is not whether you're going to eat or not. The choice
Which
is
tree?
Which we
tree.
eat from.
You're right.
But
you're
it's
right.
What's your
important.
source?
It's important to always make this distinction. I feel like it's important to make this distinction that it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Good. We want. Well, I mean, think about the divisions and the arguments that come up. It's because I'm right and you're wrong. Right and wrong. Knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
There's always death from that because there's division, right? And so I'm right, you're wrong, and we all want to know what's right. We all want to know what's wrong. We all want to do what's good, right? And so we can be doing good things. It was Eve saw that the fruit was good for knowledge.
Yeah.
And so she ate of it. It was a good fruit,
Pleasing to look at.
pleasing to look
Yeah.
at, right?
Yeah.
But it brought about death.
And it was not, the onus of that was not on the goodness, because they understood goodness. God had said 7 times, it is good. They understood goodness. The way that they understood goodness now, though, after the tree of knowledge of good and evil, was not some new epiphany of goodness, a new understanding of
Right.
goodness. It was an understanding of goodness as seeing the opposite of what is good. So now they had firsthand experience of what evil is, and because of that, they recognized, experiencing the evil, they recognized, oh man, that was really good.
Right. Yeah.
Too late.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, and I just thought about this because, Chris, you brought up a good point. This point of asking the Lord and then the Lord showing you. That's exactly what I believe he intended in the beginning, in the garden, when he was the only source of any knowledge.
Right.
And then they were deceived to look to self for knowledge of good and evil. So they got it. So they were no longer able to source from the source of life and the source of all knowledge. And so they had to source from self, which brings about death. But we can get back to a place now in Christ where we're sourcing from the Father, right? We're sourcing from Jesus is the tree of life. He's saying,
Because-
eat of me
Yeah.
Because
and you will live.
Exactly what Chris was saying. Well, if I ask, what honors you? Not if I think about it and say, okay, well, what's the right decision? And obviously, we want to think about it so that we can discern what is perfect to the Father. But that comes from revelation. But it comes
Right.
back to the essential question: God, what do you want? Because in the garden, and I learned this from Watchman Nee, reading one of his books. He was saying that essentially before the fall and before eating of the knowledge of good and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, man was amoral in a sense that every decision they made was completely and utterly dependent upon God alone. And so in Christ Jesus, right? Just like
Yeah.
what you were saying, what do you want me to do? I'm not even entertaining in my mind what I think the right and the wrong way is, because the heart is deceitful
Right.
above all things.
Right.
Right.
And so the only source of my actions should only be drawn, right,
Yes.
from participating and consuming
Absolutely.
in the flesh and the blood of Christ.
Yeah.
right?
And go ahead.
I was getting ready to potentially
Segue.
but
Okay.
you
well,
go ahead and say
hold
what
on
you were
to
going
that
to say.
thought real quick. I feel it necessary to stress that we can go to God as our source.
All the
Like
time.
that we can, even things like asking, what should I eat? That's what I was going to get at, because I can Google and people are going to tell you that this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is bad.
That's a
Everybody,
good point, man.
everybody has
Yep.
an idea of what is good
Or a
and bad
diet,
food,
or a diet, or a
right.
thing, or the
Right.
workouts you should do.
Exactly.
That's a good
right.
word.
The
man.
workouts, everybody has an idea of what is good or what is right and what is bad and what is wrong. And so to then go to the Lord and say, God, what should I be eating? Or what should I be doing? Like, I already know, and the Lord does this to me all the time, and I'm like back and forth because I just can't get my crap together. But like coffee. For me, coffee has been an issue in the past. Yeah, Jeff's
Hide
hiding
your
his
coffee,
cup.
Jeff.
Oh, I just chugged my coffee. But it's things have. I have less anxiety these days when I drink coffee because I've also cut out processed refined carbs and sugars and like wheat and soy and all that stuff. I've cut all that stuff out since January. So I'm a lot more level headed. I've lost some weight. I don't have as much anxiety as I used to, but I still do. And even just today, interestingly, like I knew that I needed this week to not be having coffee. Just like the Lord was shifting me, saying, go ahead and cut that out. Well, this morning I had coffee and I put half and half in it. And after one or two sips, and check yourself on this because you'll be interesting how your body responds to stuff. I took a couple of sips and immediately my nose was a little sniffly and then I started sneezing. Allergy. Like I'm allergic to something, either with the coffee or the half and half, because it's not like that with heavy whipping cream. Really weird. But anyways, the Lord will show you what is specific to you. Right? What is it? Where's that scripture where it says, if any man knows in his heart that he shouldn't do something and he does, it's sin for him. The scripture?
Right.
Romans,
Yes.
isn't it?
But how about an acknowledgement of those things that are for all people?
Right.
I mean, we can ask for what is specific for me,
Sure.
but if there are principles that God has given us that are
Oh, yeah.
already for all people,
Right.
and I this is not a diet, and I'm kind of, I don't diet, but so it's not fair for me to say this, but I have just an unhealthy view of food as someone who is morbidly obese. For me, food is an interruption, and I loathe the fact that I have to stop and eat.
Yeah.
And I see it as an inconvenience, and it irritates me, and I've not seen it as a blessing. And so my view has been just as skewed. To the extent, here's how wickedness crept into my heart over this issue and interiority, is we would sit down at the dinner table with my family. You get all these Beaver Cleaver ideas of we're gonna talk about things, how was school, all this stuff. And I would be like, no one's talking. No, we're here to eat. Let's get this over with so we can get on with life.
Oh my gosh.
And it was horrible. It's wicked. And I'm still battling these things. So there are practical things that I think are for all people. And apart from the diets and the good advice, I want to give a few practical things.
Yeah.
Right.
One of and I have studied quite a bit on this the last several months. Biblically, theologically, this is not me following even a Christian diet plan. I have a problem even with things like, sorry, Casey, I have a problem with things like the Daniel plan. And here's why. Because what Daniel and his friends were doing was a way of separating themselves within the culture. It was not a diet that was meant to promote their health.
Right.
It was evidence that in spite of their diet, they were healthy.
Right.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, I see so much of this creeping in even to our Christianese,
Right.
to
Yeah.
go back to one of Chris's intros.
One of 20.
But here's a practical, and it's just so simple. When you eat food. God made food.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, well, yeah, that's what I
What does
eat.
that mean? Yeah.
If it doesn't rot, it's not food.
I
Mm.
agree.
Mm.
I agree.
Okay, so eat food. Eat more food is part of what I'm saying. Eat those things God gave you.
Right.
And here's a second practical that I think is for all people, is understand, and this is in my notes, is understand
this
the
is a good
story.
one.
Understand the story. Because we don't understand soil. We don't understand plants. We don't understand these things. What we do is we go midwinter and we pick out the reddest, ripest tomatoes in the nice styrofoam package with the foil over top. And we'll vote one way, politically, whatever, never realizing that in the middle of winter, 70% of what we're eating that has been sourced in the United States was picked by illegal immigrants. And then we'll get on our soapboxes. Sorry, I just made that a little political.
Hey, that's
I'm
okay.
interested to see where you're going with it.
But here, understand the story. Understand the story of this. We don't know where it's coming from. We don't know what sort of things are being done to the creation that God himself said is good. And one illustration that I give that I did not believe, did not believe it. was on the potato crop. And this was given to me by the same author, Warren Wiersbe. But I had to check it out. One of my I don't know if employers, one of my superiors in my tradition was, and I believe still farms potatoes in Colorado. And so I had to check some of this out because I didn't believe
he
it.
farms potatoes, or he farms potatoes?
He farms fat ones, or he farms fat ones.
Yeah. But here's how this industry works, apparently. And I'm just quoting others, but I did check this out from a firsthand source, is the potato crop in America is dictated by two things, commodities, we consider them: the potato chip and the French fry. 70% of the farmed potatoes in America go to those two industries.
Goodness.
Two of the worst things for our bodies, if we're going to talk about what's good for us and bad for us. They serve no nutritional value for us at all.
None whatsoever.
None. And actually are a detriment.
And they're typically fried in seed and vegetable oils, which are a byproduct of industry, sold to the masses, and are terrible for inflammation in the body. Just FYI.
And the salts and the sugars, and that's all beside the point. But here's what this requires. Here's what these industries require: is a uniform potato, a uniform size, so that the potato chips are relatively the same size and the French fries fit in the box. Well, if you plant a potato crop, you don't get that in a soil base because there's irregularities in that soil base. So what the potato farmer does is they go in and they kill the ground, biologically kill the ground, so that there's nothing organic, there's nothing biological, there's no inconsistencies in the soil. Then they plant the crop, and then they feed it unnaturally. Okay. That's all good. This serves the product. This makes food a commodity, not a blessing.
Dang.
Right.
Okay. So you're like, well, what's the big deal? Well, what the big deal is now if that ground goes fallow for 10 years, a decade, that ground in northern Colorado or in Colorado goes to desert in 10 years because there is nothing there. Okay, so we have just destroyed what God called good for the sake of a potato chip and a French fry. And it's a little sickening.
Well, when you put it that way.
And I love these things, but here, when I say eat food and when I say get the backstory, this is part of the backstory.
Yeah. And
understand that.
yeah. And man, I absolutely agree. Cause we went to, did you go to the Outcry? Was it called Outcry?
Yes.
Yeah. And remember when we were standing in line and all those people were handing out pamphlets, it was like,
Yes.
it was going, vegan for God's cause.
Oh,
basically.
was it? Is that what they were?
Because it had a lamb on there and everything else. But and when you look at those kind of things and you look at the people handing them out, you're like, oh, you gypsy vegan, you know what I'm saying? Whatever you want to say, you know what I mean? But as I looked at the pamphlet, and it was mapping out the way that we, for the sake of commodity and for the sake of mass production, the way that we treat animals and stuff like that. And I'm not making this political. I'm only saying what this pamphlet spoke to me.
Sure.
It laid out what I'm not going to go into, but with the Tyson chicken farms and stuff that, the way that they treat chickens, and even
some bad
calves.
stuff.
Well, I will say Tyson, I have researched this. Tyson has really improved the standards. So
Okay.
Tyson is one. Chick-fil-A farms from farms that treat their chickens fairly well.
Yeah.
So
God's chicken.
So stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not only that,
they read
but
them the scriptures before they.
not only that, but to produce milk from cows, they artificially inseminate cows.
Gross, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So that they produce young, that we don't care about the calf, they just want the milk. You know what I'm saying? And
it can get ugly.
it gets super ugly.
Yeah.
But and just like what the point there, like turning it from sacrament into desecration is the way, and knowing the backstory and things like that, and to me at the time, and I had gotten off track obviously, but at the time that really, I was like, man, that is a total disrespect. You know what I mean? To the, just like what you were saying with the ground, just destroy the whole ground for the sake.
I know people who are vegan, or don't eat certain kinds of meat, or only buy the most expensive because it's farm raised, or grass fed, no hormone, non GMO. I mean, they eat that way, but it's
But they
because
do it
it's
so that they can walk into a
No.
bar and tell you that I'm a vegan. You know what I mean? There's a
no,
difference
that's not
between
who I'm talking
respecting-
about right now. Who I'm talking about are those who have done this research and have a conviction based on that, and say, I won't eat industry produced meat
Right.
because of that, because it's a desecration of God's creation.
And this is not a plea for extremism.
Right.
This is not a.
Yeah, we're not pushing agenda.
We're not advocating.
No.
Veganism, vegetarianism. I do believe God has given us the bounty of creation. He said,
Yeah.
even God said to Peter, kill
Kill and eat.
But
Rise,
but
kill
isn't
and
this
eat 3 times.
isn't this part of the story that we're missing? We just get directly to the eating without the killing. We get directly to the eating without the planting. We get directly to the product without the purchase of the investment. It's a commodity. And so when it becomes a commodity, it's all about volume for cost. And not about what is best for my body, best for my family, best for what God has created.
Right. So help me then. Let's redeem all of this badness.
But isn't that the state of the church, though? I mean, westernized culture, the church?
Well, let me redeem it then with one thought in that instance within the church.
Sure.
Let's take it back to the concept of the Last Supper, the communion. I always default to calling it the Eucharist because Eucharist means Thanksgiving. And I want us to think about food and Thanksgiving in the same hand. We pray. Our Christianese prayers, right? Our meal prayers,
Right.
Is God bless this.
God is
food.
great. God is good. Let us thank Him for His food.
Oh, yeah.
Bless the
Wow.
hands that prepared this.
The hands that prepared this. Bless this food for the nourishment of our body and the furtherance of your kingdom.
Oh my gosh.
Right? All of this stuff. I've been on this kick for several months, and I about cried at dinner some weeks ago when my daughter was praying, and she said, "And God, thank you for whatever protein we were eating. I don't remember at the time, but thank you for the life that was taken so that I could live."
Holy moly! Wow.
And, okay, so do you know that meal that I have been so kind of a curmudgeon about, well, we got to get through this. Do you know, for me, sitting around the table with my family that night, that meal became a sacrament. Thanksgiving. It became Eucharist. And I want us to think about the meal of Christ this way, okay? If we will consume the body of Christ, which is what we are to do, it is a sacrament. And it's not just a spiritual thing. It is something we are to do together in community. But if we will consume the body of Christ in this setting, we need to remind ourselves that as the church, we are also the body of Christ, which means when we go out of that assembly, however that looks,
We're supposed to be consumed.
we are consumed. We are broken. We are spilled out for the redemption of the world.
Wow.
Right. Do you think there's a correlation between not taking seriously the Eucharist
Yes.
and the way that we eat? In the things that we eat,
Yes.
and I mean, just because as you're saying these things, that's where my mind goes. It's like, man, I wonder if I mean, because I'm guilty of taking communion as part of
just a thing.
it's being done. I'm going to do it. Okay, Lord, let me try to like
a form without any sort of it's form without function.
Yes.
It's just something we do out of ritual.
Yes.
But through this study in particular, and I've thought about this for years, but I decided as our local gathering at the church I pastor, we're moving to a weekly celebration.
Yeah.
But it's very particular. We're now baking our own bread. Mm-hmm. So we have people participating in that.
That's cool.
They're invested, and they're not just going to the store. They're a part of that process, a part of that.
And when the bread when there's leftover, the bread itself is either taken and eaten. You're like, well, you can't just snack on it, or do what? Put it in the trash. And it's good bread.
Yeah.
It's a great recipe. Or sometimes I give it to my chickens. It's like, well, that that produces fruit. We take the juice, we pour it back into the cups, and we drink it.
Right. So what I'm hearing right now is you're saying that Christ is in all things, right?
Yeah.
In him we have our,
And I want to reverse it.
how does that scripture go?
All things are in Christ.
Right.
All things are in Christ.
In him we
Yeah.
have our being, and right.
Yes, yeah. If we say Christ is in all things, that's true to an extent. But that stumbles very quickly into pantheism, where God is all things. But the
We don't want to stumble into pantheism.
No, the converse.
You don't want to stumble in there, bro.
The converse, though,
Yeah.
is true, that all things are in
Right.
Him.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, for in him we live and move and have our being. So it's the intentionality of seeing Christ in all things. So we have a weekly. So we do communion every week before worship, but the first Sunday of the week we always have a potluck. And so I've gotten into the habit of praying, and I pray this intentionally every time, and people hear me say it every time. But it's my way of thanking the Father for the way that He provides for us in all ways, especially with where we are in this country and our level of wealth and our standard of living here. I suppose we're obviously way crazy blessed with bounty, right? Hand over fist food. But on Sundays when we come together and we have potluck and we essentially have all of this food that we get to sit down and eat and consume together, I always pray, I say, Lord, as much as there's food on this table, remind us that you continually provide for us all things physically and spiritually. And so let the feast be a reminder of your infinite love and mercy and grace for us. So when you look and you're like, man, there's so much food, I think, gosh, there's so much grace, there's so much love. I try and make that a physical representation of the bounty that the Father pours out to us. And I'm always intentional about that. And I believe so much now, so much more in the feast. So the Feast of the Tabernacle, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? The Lord prescribed the feast to his people. He prescribed celebration. He was like, you want law, I'm going to give you law, but it's going to be for your benefit. So that one, you see Christ in everything because all of the feasts point to Christ.
Right.
Why shouldn't ours? Right?
Yep.
So it's just intentionality in seeing Christ in all things. And food is one of those things that we've taken for granted, or we've developed a relationship or an addiction or a disdain.
Right.
All equally perverse. And remember that
That was good. I'm done.
the sacrifices all throughout Scripture were consumed by the people. The Passover lamb, on the night that the Israelites were getting ready to exit Egypt, he said, "Yes, kill the lamb, wipe the doorposts of your home, and then eat the lamb." The sacrifice is always consumed. It's always consumed. And I think
then Jesus gave us a way to consume his sacrifice.
John the Baptizer said, "Behold the Lamb of God who taketh away the sins of the world." How does he take it away? Part of it is we consume.
Right. Right. Jesus would have said, "Eat my flesh and drink my blood." And John would have been like, I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah.
And he was going to tell us to do that.
But then, and this has to be emphasized. We cannot leave here without everyone understanding this, that this then is the proper response of the church to the world. Read that passage in 2 Corinthians 5:20. Well, what is it? 18
what
through
is
20. 2 Corinthians 5:18 through 21. And he said that we have been given the role of ambassador into the world. And just as Christ came to reconcile us to the Father, now we have been given the ministry of reconciliation. It's a Christ form cruciform.
And also,
as though God were making his appeal through us.
Well, yeah, and all the times that you really look at Jesus when he was with Peter and everything, it was about reconciliation, man. So the meal is to point to reconciliation, or as a process of reconciliation.
This is what grace is. Grace is being consumed. And mercy is allowing yourself to be consumed. Grace is the act of consuming.
Yikes.
So really this conversation is centered around redeeming, food in the mind of all people,
That's
especially
a better
believers.
title. That's a great title. We should have
Redeeming
said that.
food.
Yeah.
Redeeming food.
But even also the table,
Yeah.
because from
Yes.
sharing, what I've really appreciated about today's conversation is you sharing some insight into your life. And I mean, even today, we're so guilty of this. Of tonight we had dinner and we turned off. We didn't have the TV on, and my kids are like, "Where's the TV?" And we're like, "We're not having the TV on." Like it's. But there's these things that we do in the way that we sit around a table. I mean, some people are going, "You sit around a table?" But we have a table.
Yeah.
Our family purposely purchased a big table because, and I like that in your notes. You talked about the table and you talked about that, and there. I mean, the table should be this sacred space that when we gather around it, I mean, we're giving
Yes.
thanks, but we're
Yes.
also engaging with one another, and we're present with one another, and we're admonishing and encouraging. I mean, there's all of the one another's
Right.
that are happening around the
Yes.
table, and I think redeeming food and redeeming the table. I mean, these are the things that my takeaways. I've been pretty quiet, but that's because I'm being convicted like crazy, but also encouraged and spurred to take action. In my own life. And so this is extreme. I mean, Casey, I'm super glad that, thank you, Jeff, to come in. I'm not trying to wrap up. I'm just letting you know, thank you, because this has been extremely beneficial for me. But how does someone that's listening to what we're saying not just go, well, you guys are just talking about health. Like what, I know that's not what we're trying to get at, but what would you say to that person that says, well, hey, you guys are just talking about health?
I mean, I can be real snarky and say something like what Jesus said. Well, if you have ears, if you have ears, let them hear.
Yeah.
If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't.
Right.
Jesus wasn't really concerned about keeping a crowd around.
Right.
But I would say implement the practicals as ways of understanding the spiritual. And this is going to help form these habits in your life that will shape your heart around this. And I want you to think, what is a practical? I want you to come to the dinner table, even just once a day. If you make the commitment or start small, once a week, you're going to come to the dinner table and think of the table as an altar. You're like, that's profane. No, a sacrifice has been made. Something died.
Yeah.
And here's an altar. How do you bow down at this altar? Do you bow down in thankfulness and expectation of the communion that you will receive? Or do you bow down in a spirit of knowledge of good and evil, which is give me without the thanksgiving? I deserve it.
Help me understand in this context then, because you can come to the table with the wrong attitude, the wrong heart, the way that you just described it. Well, Peter addresses that in the church Corinth, right?
Yeah.
Where he says, some of you have some of you have taken this meal and you've gone off and you've eaten alone before everybody else has. And he says, some of you have fallen ill and died.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Yep. You've gotten drunk on the wine. You were gluttons with the food. And what it was about was a breach of communion. This is always what it gets down to. It's the
Commodity.
It's the commodity, because what he was saying is some of you are hoarding food, which is keeping it from others. Boy, if that doesn't speak to our culture. He says some of you are taking at the expense of others, which is a breach of communion. And the perichoretic.
Come on now.
How dare you?
Good day, sir.
What did you call me?
There's the door, Jeff.
But the nature of the church is the reflection of the image of God, right? Hear me on this, Jason. You alone are not created in the image of God. I'm not created in the image of God. Let us create them. We are in the image of God, and we do not reflect the image of God if there is a breach in communion. And this is what was going on. So he says, in this, you're getting sick and you're dying because you're separating yourself from communion with each other, where the body of Christ resides, which is essentially separating yourself from him in this life.
Ooh.
Does that make sense?
My Lord.
Yeah. Well, apart from me, you can do nothing. And the branch that it doesn't bear fruit is taken away and it dies and is thrown in the fire. So I have just a couple things I want to say real quick. I was going to say, one, with all things, redemption is near. So we're not just talking about diet, right? Christ wants to redeem every part of us. Look, let me just say this concerning sin, because you brought it up earlier, Chris. You said, if I have a porn addiction and I'm crying out to the Lord saying, oh, I just don't want to feel this way. I don't want the guilt. I don't want the shame. Well, then your motivation for repentance and for forgiveness is so that you feel better. It's selfish, right? But oh gosh, I lost my thought.
And one might even say that if it weren't for that feeling, would someone not want
Exactly.
Right.
something to change?
Exactly.
And so
Sure.
it all goes back to your motivations. Are we motivated by self? Are we motivated by honoring God?
Right. Yeah. So what I was going to say is, here's the thing. God just doesn't want to deal with one sin in your life. He's going to deal with all sin in your life. And I believe the Lord takes a holistic approach towards sanctification, right? So he's going to look at you and he's going to look at all the areas in your life where there's sin manifesting. And he's going to say, look, it's almost like you're playing the game of whack-a-mole, right? So this sin pops up and you whack it. Well, the Lord comes with one big mallet and he knocks all the moles on the head at the same time. And that's how he wants to deal with things. And so in my life, and I'll just go ahead and get a little bit honest here, I suppose. I've been on a diet for since January, and I got off of sugar and wheat and gluten and soy, and so I'm basically doing a keto diet. And anyways, I've lost quite a bit of weight, but something that I've also noticed, and I've heard other people talking about this, is that the propensity towards addiction and towards lust and like porn and that kind of stuff goes away when people start to get their diet under control. And specifically in studies where the keto diet is a thing, that has been a thing. And I've experienced it. I'm like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Like the cravings kind of go away. Well, it's interesting that somehow my diet had an effect on my mind,
right?
But it's also spiritual, but it's also physical.
But it's a self-control, man.
It's self-control.
You're exercising self-control. And I had also thought about this for a while, man. It's like, dude, I believe wholeheartedly that fasting, although it is a spiritual discipline, I believe that the exercising of control over your body translates to being able to exercise your control over temptation. Not your control as in I have control over temptation, but you do have a choice.
Well, there's also physiological not ramifications, but benefits, physiological benefits
and
as well as
psychological benefits as well.
Right.
Well, if we look at the tripart man, body, soul, spirit, and we look at body, and if we look at actually allowing, our spirit man being able to influence by the Holy Spirit, being able to exercise authority over the body, there's some good things that are going to happen. When normally the two other parts of man, normally we only focus on body and ignore soul and spirit. And so when that begins to happen, there's some good things that are going to come into alignment.
It's an overdevelopment in certain areas of that mind, body, spirit. You can overdevelop in areas like that. Just like what you're saying, you can focus so much on the spiritual, or focus so much on my mind, or focus so much on my body. But the true discipline is in the balance of all three of them.
All things. We are made unified wholes.
Yes.
Not parts.
And so what I wanted to touch a little bit on redemption, because Pastor Jeff said something that was profound this last weekend, which was that it's not just humans that are being redeemed. It is all of creation is going to be redeemed, right? It says
through us,
correct.
Yeah.
It says for all of creation groans for the revelation of the sons of God, because that redemptive process, man. Like, and I believe that like what we were talking about with the respect and not desecrating. I believe that that's a redemptive process, that respect and that acknowledgement of knowing the backstory of everything that like what you were talking about, like where it comes from, and not just like we keep saying the word commodity and consuming, but we've become so. I mean, geez, dude, like just like he was saying, you come back here and like when I went over to India, dude. You'd be pretty hard pressed to find an overweight person over there. I'm telling you, dude. You know what I mean? It's not for lack. It's just, or you go. I mean, even to Colorado. If you go to Colorado, you'll be hard pressed to find an overweight person, because everybody out there is all about the outdoors, everything like that. You know what I mean? But we have become so, gosh, just overtaken in a way, man, and it's hard to get out of that, and I realized in my life how hard it is, like once you've begun on a certain path, or even with diet, we'll just keep it on topic, but man, like those first few days where you're like, dude, where you want to change things, man, those first few days, man, you're like, dude,
you're fighting
it's hard,
you're fighting
to
addiction,
get out.
man.
It's hard to get out of that slump that you put yourself into, man. And I just believe we've become so lazy and lethargic.
Well, just self-satisfying,
right?
I mean,
Because partly because of our lack of action, but we've also become lethargic. When you eat a lot of food, man, you just get like tired, man. That turkey from there got me tired.
Tryptophan.
You just literally live in that perpetually.
Then you're waiting until there's just enough room where you can
Eat
cram
more.
just a little bit more.
Amen.
And this is I want to give a book recommendation, and I know I've talked about Warren Wiersba's Food and Faith.
How do you spell his last name?
Wirzba. And you can Google him, and he gives great talks. I think he's out of Duke, but another one based on what you were talking about just now, Casey, is one by the name. The author is James Long. I believe it's James K. Long. And it's called "You Are What You Love."
Ooh.
Yeah. And it deals exactly with what you're talking about, and this concept of forming habits as a demonstration, and how hard it is, but this is an evidence of what you love, and what you love is who you are. You look like what you love.
If you love crack, let me tell you,
You look like
crack.
you look like you love crack.
Well,
you know what I mean?
isn't it interesting? I think Paul meant this as a bit. I think Paul meant this as a bit of a jab.
If you're struggling with crack, I'm sorry, I'm not being insensitive. I'm just saying.
But you look like crack.
But isn't it funny? Paul makes the comment about how your food or your belly is your God.
Right.
And you look around America and you go, my, our God is very big.
Right. Yeah.
You are what you love. And so you just, and so I'm always reluctant to give out book recommendations because I don't want people to hear me saying I'm book heavy when I'm not Bible heavy. These are biblical principles, and I'm Bible heavy also.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's good. I wanted to go back to what I was saying, because Casey, you hit on it too. And I was just saying, with all things, redemption is near, right? So the Lord is going to redeem all things. He's going to sanctify every part of our life. And I don't know that many people really get to the point to where they say, it's like, oh, I'm trying to deal with the porn addiction. I'm trying to not yell at my wife. I'm trying to not do this, not do that. When is somebody ever saying, I really wish the Lord would redeem my relationship with food? Like, who prays that with agony? Right? God, help me with this addiction. Oh my gosh, God, I hate this sin. I hate this sin. When are people saying, help me with this food situation?
Because it's easy. It's easy to look at people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol. It's easy to look at that and say, you know what, shame on you. You know what I mean? When the fact that it's, you're addicted, what are you addicted to?
But if we said that, it would ruin an industry. Quick Trip would be out of business. Casey's would be gone. All of these things.
All the middle aisles in the grocery stores
aisles
would be
of
gone.
the grocery
It's the
stores
same
would be
thing with a
gone.
lot of religious systems, though.
Yeah.
You upset that
Right.
with the name of Jesus, and all of a sudden every establishment is upturned. Why do you think they fight it all the time? You know what I mean?
What if? And I mean, this is going to sound like a Jesus juke on you. I'm sorry, but what if we got to a point to where when someone's like, "Man, you're looking good. Like, have you been changing things up?" And you're like, "Yeah, man, I've been honoring God." Like that was the first thing that came out of our mouths.
Just been
instead of-
really trying to honor the Lord with
really
my
just
diet.
been honoring
But
God.
for real though, so I just want to say this real quick. So my wife and I, we've made dietary changes together, and that was seriously an answered prayer, and the Lord just doing what He does. And it's interesting that my relationship with my wife would strengthen when our relationship with food changed.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
now what we do is we cook more at home together, which in turn puts us at the table together more. Her dad is also trying to do some dietary stuff. And so we just told him, like, hey, we're going to be cooking these low carb meals different nights throughout the week when we're home. If we're already cooking, why aren't you just coming over and eating with us? And so he's been over a couple times a week.
It's built relationships.
So we've
That's
got
dope, man.
right. So we've got me, my wife, my father-in-law, my daughter, and Henry, right, my son. So now we're all getting together and eating. The other night, Sunday night, we invited Pocky, who actually lives in our backyard in the prayer shack.
That's where I used to live.
But he came over to eat, and we said, we ought to just do this every
All the
Sunday night.
time.
We're going to cook anyway. Just come over. And so now that we're cooking at home more, we're inviting people over more to eat. And it's just amazing how
Redeeming the table.
redeeming the table.
What's interesting is that sacrifice in the Hebrew, I think, means something prepared, right?
Yes, to some extent.
There's multiple meanings, but
there's
one
so
of them
many meanings,
is something prepared, and what
Yeah,
you're doing right there, just like what you were saying, like we've lost the preparation of it. We just eat it
Right,
without even
right.
thinking about it. But like even the preparation of the meal, just like you were talking about, including somebody in the preparation of the
bread.
communion
Right.
bread, gives somebody it creates a cohesiveness,
Right.
man. Even in that small stuff, like what you were saying, like when's the last time you ever thought, well, man, I just want the Lord to redeem, my relationship with food. But like even in that right there, it's a beautiful thing, man. Me and my wife and I, we're cooking together, but that's time together that you're preparing
That's
something
quality time.
you're preparing the sacrifice for the table, right?
Right.
Dude, that's dope.
I kind of feel like this goes back to habits, but there's almost this domino effect that if you, let's say you swing by and you pick up something on the way home, and then you're in a hurry to get home, and then you get home and you eat, and then it's almost like it starts this cycle of dominoes that continue to topple over with how the rest of your evening is going to go, as opposed to going home, cooking, taking that time and spending it with your family. It's like when you knock over the right domino, it's sourcing from the right tree again. Here we go with the two trees. Am I going to eat from this tree? Or am I going to eat from this tree? And really posture and how we posture ourselves.
And the time, it begins with a sacrifice of time. It is a sacrifice of togetherness. So I'm no longer allowed to be an individual and isolated and alone. And it culminates in the sharing of a sacrifice of something that died for you. See, it's always sacrifice. And I encourage people even to push that sacrifice further. Not everyone can grow enough of their own food to sustain their family.
Right.
But grow something so that next time you go to the grocery store, you understand, you will have a better appreciation for that tomato or that cucumber.
For sure.
I just had a friend of mine on Facebook, Keith Russo. I think you guys know him, but he planted a pineapple head 2 years.
Yeah.
And he picked it. And he had this pineapple
amazing.
Was
for
that
2 years.
Yeah.
And then we just go and pick up a pineapple. We're guilty
Right,
of literally
right.
letting a pineapple rot and not eating it because it went past.
Yeah.
But to go back to your point, we can start with herbs.
Right.
Cilantro, basil, all those things.
And you'll appreciate it more. And something else that's tangible is eat it in season.
Yeah.
Right.
I know you hear that a lot on TV, but understand you're also hearing an industry. We have a diet industry that, isn't it amazing? The turn of the new year, we talk about diets. Then by Super Bowl Sunday, we're talking about hot wings. And so the diet industry feeds the food industry, which feeds the diet industry, which feeds, and it's a cycle.
Oh, it's crazy.
And so, there's more practicality to this. If you grow something, you understand it from the beginning to the end. You appreciate it more. You're not going to let it rot. And eating it in season. Our bodies are designed for that.
Right.
Isn't it amazing that we sell smoked meats in the middle of winter? Why is that? Well, it's because that's how we preserved meats
Right.
to get us through the winter.
Yeah.
So when do they put them on the big displays? Well, in fall and winter.
Yeah.
And so that's when we eat. But then we'll spend as much time going and buying the tomatoes that were made red on their ride here from Mexico.
Yeah.
And our bodies understand that. And right now we live in a culture that we can get anything in any season.
Right.
And I'd challenge you to we were designed with a biological clock. I challenge you, even in your food, to eat your biological clock.
Right.
Dang.
Yeah. So Matt Brown on Facebook says, redeeming the table brings back the intimacy designed for our relationships.
That's my dude, Matt Brown.
Yeah. Matt White. I was gonna say I have a real quick story about food and like
So now
color.
you want to add stories and support stories and bringing up random things? Gotcha.
Yeah,
Go
now
for
you
it.
want to support smoking meat when he was
no.
just talking about it at the beginning of the podcast. Wow.
Message received.
For this segment of the podcast, Jason would like to tell a story. Is that okay with everybody?
With this segment called Hypocrisy,
Burn up, pip down. So, recently, so here's one of those things. I was asking the Lord, you know, show me some things about diet. What do I need to be doing? And he showed me specifically when I eat at home in the evenings, I need to be having fish and vegetables. And so I've been almost, a couple times a week, not every single night, but I need to integrate fish and vegetables into my diet more. And so I've been buying this salmon from Aldi that's already pre-seasoned. It's super delicious, but it is wild caught Atlantic salmon, which is different than farm raised salmon. So let me tell you about farm raised salmon. They farm raised salmon in lakes that are overcrowded and essentially polluted with their own feces and whatever. So it's not really fresh water. And they feed the salmon grain pellets. And so they are they're malnourished.
they will also eat one another when they die.
Yes.
So they'll eat the carcasses
Right.
of whatever fish are dying.
And
as
so
well.
because their meat is so
It makes them taste more fishy.
Not only that, but when
Salmonalism?
when a disease when a pathogen is introduced to one salmon,
Oh,
then
gosh.
they're in such close proximity to each other that it just like almost decimates the entire population.
So here's why it's so disgusting is that their meat, which is naturally pink, is white because they're malnourished. So then they dye the salmon pink. I learned this years ago. I went to Sam's. I used to buy the big, massive pieces of salmon because it was cheaper at Sam's.
Salmon at Salmon.
Salmon at Sam's. Sam salmon. Sam salmon. And on the package, it says down at the bottom, dyed pink. And I was like, never again. So I only eat wild caught Atlantic salmon or wild caught salmon. I won't eat. But anyways, just interesting that again you were talking about we don't know where food's coming from, what are they doing to like make it good and that kind of stuff. Just being aware of that obviously is
right
is a big deal,
because knowledge is now you know, and
knowledge is power.
Knowing is half the battle,
G.I. Joe,
and the other half is violence.
Oh my
I like
gosh.
that.
It's the truth.
That's very American of you.
Yeah,
Man.
dude.
So
brother.
I'll just end with, if you guys want to queue up an encouragement for our listeners, I think we're kind of winding down here, but I just want to encourage people, man, seriously, go to the Lord and ask him how he can redeem your relationship with food, because you would be amazed not only what he'll do to, show you, root out some sin in your life, maybe show you some addiction, but there's going to be things in your life that are going to shift if he, helps you shift diet, but not only with like feeling better physically, that kind of thing, but also again, redeeming the table. Like how is he going to redeem that time with your meal? Because I can sit down for a meal by myself and I can still bow my head and thank the Lord in that moment. Right. Or I can do it with other people. There's a book that I listened to called 5 Habits of Highly Missional People. And anyways, one of the habits was eating with somebody 3 times a week.
Nice.
So roughly if we eat 3 meals a day over the course of a week, that's 21 meals. Surely we could spend 3 of those meals with somebody who is an acquaintance or a friend or somebody we don't know, and redeem that time to also be missional.
Right.
Yep. So that's my encouragement.
I think for me, it's funny because as I'm sitting here, my wife has been texting me and saying she can't get the kids to bed and she's frustrated about that. And I'm thinking, I told those dang kids, when I leave, like they need to listen to their mom, they need to go to bed when she says to go to bed, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to spank them. And then I'm stopping and I'm already going in. And as I'm stopping, I'm getting checked and going, well, Chris, you're addressing the fruit and not the root. You're addressing what they're doing. And my son and daughter, they're 2 and 4, about to be 3 and 5. I can sit down and have a conversation with them and address the root issues that are going on with what they're doing. And I guarantee you it will be better received than if I were to go in guns blazing trying to attack the fruit. So my advice and encouragement would be to you, with whatever has been on your mind during this conversation about redeeming food and the table and all that stuff, go to God and ask him to expose the roots of your heart that are currently malnourished, damaged, cut. I mean, whatever that stuff is, just go to God and seek Him. He can see those root systems, and He can address those things with us. And I think that if we begin to focus on those roots instead of just the things that are going on above the surface, there's some good stuff that's going to take place in our lives.
Yeah. And, I hope that this podcast has blessed some people, and I knew that it was important to talk about. And I just want you guys to not hear any form of law or like we were saying, like how the Pharisees are saying, you can't eat this, can't eat that. That's not what we're saying. And we just wanted to provide some fundamental, just something to think about as you consider moving on into deeper parts of your relationship with God, as we do offer. And it says, honor Him with everything that you do. And, eating and dieting is a discipline. And, I really enjoyed what, Jason and Jeff and Chris were talking about, which is, ask God, He'll show you, and don't. And I'm guilty of this recently. I was like, man, I'm asking all these people, hey man, like what should I do for diet and what should I do for workout and stuff like that, so that I can get my body primed up for competition next year. You know what I mean? Because I want to go in there and I want to get a world title, dude.
I want to go ham.
That's it. I want a world
title.
I want a world title, but I never even once thought to get down on my knees and be like, you know what, God, I want a world title. But like, it's like, well, how am I going to honor God with that? Like, I never even thought to ask Him, God, how do you want me to eat? And how, because I believe that doing, and I mean, after hearing this, I think that if I would have done it without not hearing this podcast, if I would have went back and started dieting the way that I wanted to do and the way that everybody else told me to do it, I don't believe that there's power in that.
Right.
I believe that there's power in saying, God, I want to honor you with my body, and I want to honor, and so hopefully someday I'll honor you with the world title. You know what I mean? Bring it on home. But
Lord Jesus, if you want to give me 20,000 Instagram followers too,
God, if you'll just get me out of jail,
Lord,
drop
if you will
this
just
case.
give me that platform,
I know,
Heavenly Father.
But this is what we were talking about.
Father God, thank you so much, Father God, for this world title. Father God,
Father God, we just really, Father God, want to, I thank you.
Father God.
But no, honestly, coming back to that, like I never once, I didn't even consider it, and I'm being convicted. You know what I mean? Like, God, how do you want me to live? How do you want me to eat? How do you want this to honor you? How do you, so that I look like you and I look like Christ, which in turn, when I look like Christ, that means that I look like you. You know what I mean? Because Christ is the perfect image of the Father, and if I look like Christ, then I look like God. So
CrossFit, baby.
And when you look like Christ, you look like God to a dying world. You know what I'm saying? And that image, the love of the Father. So I just encourage you to go whole ham on it, man. Don't. I'm gonna encourage
organic, free range.
Yeah, that's that free range.
Grass-fed ham.
Grass-fed. Yeah, all that stuff. But I'm gonna go home and I'm going to seriously seek the Lord and be like, you know what? How do you want me to do this?
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Always wanting to point people to Jesus. Go talk to Him.
Why do we even podcast? We should just literally get on here every single episode.
Talk to
like,
Jesus.
You know what?
Just go.
Well, it was like
talk to Jesus.
No, never mind.
What?
Don't.
Yeah, I know what you were going to say.
No, don't, Chris.
Yeah, anyways.
I don't know what he's.
Jeff, were you done? Are you tapped?
Yeah, I'm good. I would just say the difference.
I'm good.
I'm good.
It's all about
hear
you,
this.
Jeff.
Hear this, and hear the difference between conviction and guilt. Do not come to the table with guilt. Come to the table with conviction.
Right.
Conviction nurtures life. Guilt destroys.
Nice.
And redeem the table. If you redeem the table, you will redeem relationships in your life.
Amen.
Guaranteed. And so understand that and be the body of Christ to the world, broken and spilled out.
Can you tell me that quote again? Conviction what?
I don't know, man.
I mean, it's the Spirit speaking through. Why don't you go ask God? Go ask God what He said.
Yeah, conviction is from God. Guilt is not.
Right.
Conviction nurtures life. Guilt destroys it.
Guilt destroys life. Yeah, I think I might use that to market our podcast episode.
Claim it as your own and
Amen. Claim it.
Yeah.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Blab it and grab it.
Well, but Oh my gosh. You guys already know what's up. SaltyDogsPodcast.com. Shoot us a
SDP.
message. Hit us up on Facebook. Join the Facebook group. Check out our Patreon account. Do all that fun stuff.
Hey, and can I say thank you to the people that send
Yes.
us emails? Thank you to the people that send us emails and tell us how this is affecting you. Seriously, those things really help. I know they help Casey and me and Jason just really realize that what we're doing matters and that there are people who are having life spoken into them based on the conversations that we're having. So, man, continue to send those. We read them. They mean a lot to us.
They go literally straight to our inbox, and I read them every single time you guys pop them.
And then we'll read them. We'll read them during the Pass the Salt segment. So
we can salt the ham
salt the whole ham.
as we go ham.
Organic.
In the land of ham.
The whole ham.
Free
Nothing
range.
but the ham.
Not
all the ham.
GMO.
You swear to
Pork
God, ham, the
loins.
whole ham and nothing but the ham.
Pork butt.
So help us God.
Ham a lamb.
Ham a lamb a ding dong. Shalam a lamb.